What is up, everybody, and welcome back to another Daily Drop brought to you by Tar Heel Illustrated. I'm THI staff writer Jacob Turner. Joining me, as he always does, is THI publisher Andrew Jones. And AJ, we're here to talk about Gene Chizik's defense in year two in this Daily Drop, expectations, maybe how we see them improving, and again, what maybe are some realistic expectations for this defense in Gene Chizik's second year at the helm. So I'm going to kick it to you. And I think there's a lot of different factors to talk about in this one too. We obviously some of the coordinator hires, some of the other staff additions that have been made, also a couple of different changes in personnel and position group coaches on that side. So not as simple as just Chizik being there for a second year, which we'd expect the defense to improve with that alone, but some other factors going into it as well. So I guess talk to me, AJ, about maybe what are the realistic expectations, I think, is the best way to dive into this topic initially for Carolina's defense in a second season with Gene Chizik at the helm?
Well, to gauge expectations, there are several factors that have to be woven into the thought process here. One being Gene Chizik, so it should be a lot better, right? It should have been better last year, but I'll get into a few minutes. Something that I got from a really good source about one of the things that hampered last year's defense that Gene himself could control and, by all accounts, has dealt with. You have to have the personnel, and I think they've made an improvement with personnel. I think they're much better in secondary now than they were. Huzzy is better than Grimes and Duck. He's better than those guys. He's consistent. He knows how to find the ball. I think the teaching in the back end of the defense has improved. I think the teaching in the front of the defense has improved. And some people reported that Tim Cross was gone. We said he wasn't. I had a great source tell me after the bowl game in San Diego that Cross wasn't going anywhere. The kids love him too much. And what was done is Mac brought in Ted Monachino, and Monachino's pupil has been Tim Cross. He's a pass rush specialist. He's coached great players in the NFL, and he came in. He's here for 1 year, Chapel Hill, and he has really helped Tim Cross. Great working relationship, and sources in the program say Tim Cross is a much better coach now than he was a year ago. But it's also on the kids; they have to get better too. They've trimmed down a little bit. I think they're a little bit quicker off the ball. Getting off the ball low and quick has been a point of emphasis for the defensive line. Generating a conventional pass rush, and part of that is staying in your lane, so to speak. Don't compensate for other guys, because a lot of the time someone would compensate for another lineman that they think might not be getting the job done, and what it does is it takes them out of their assignment, and two guys are suddenly out of place. Mm-hmm. We've seen that with the secondary at times too. So you have to have the personnel, you have to have the scheme. They believe that the scheme will be better because it will be tweaked because there were things learned. And the coaching has been better. Another thing about the Jacks, Gene last year had to spend more time than he wanted to coaching the guys up front and then coaching the back of the defense. Now he's spending almost all of his time with the Jacks. Those are his guys. And I think, and that's good, because they had to learn something new last year, and at times they maybe didn't get the time from Chizik that they needed. Now you've got Amari Gaynor, and you've got Kamen Rucker over there, and the two of them have gotten a great deal of attention from Gene, and that means that the organization of the defense from the top down is more secure and operating better and more fluidly now than it did a year ago. So for all those reasons, it should be better, and I would go out on a limb and say it should be 25 to 30% better. Mm-hmm. And honestly, let me say this as a sidebar. Gene won't bring it up much, but Mac will bring it up because he likes numbers. And he'll tell you, well, everybody shoveled dirt on us after 61 points and 41 in the fourth quarter in Appalachian State. Okay, that's true. And that did affect the numbers. And he said that following Monday, well, that screws our defensive rankings for the rest of the year. It did. Mm-hmm. They were better, but they weren't. They even when they were at their best last year defensively, a lot of it was because they were playing crappy offenses. They need to get a lot better. So 20 to 30% better wouldn't put them in the top 30 nationally, in my opinion. It would put them maybe in the top 50. Mm-hmm. If they're around number 50 and the offense is as good as we think it could be, that will be enough to get them to a certain point. Now, to get past that point, you got to be better on defense. So
Yeah.
we don't know if it's realistic or even fair to expect more than 20 to 30% improvement. And we'll know when they get to that point in the season if there still is room to improve or if they actually are more than 30% better. But I think that that's a fair expectation.
Yeah, because I'm glad you said that too, because the defense, we hit on it so much towards the end of the year, but it was the offense that sputtered for different reasons, which we can't talk about and have talked about in some ways, over the last 6 months going back to the end of the season, where we've kind of hashed out maybe what went wrong with the offense and why. But it did improve towards the end. The defensive stats, just go look at the numbers. It wasn't an incredible improvement, but it did improve, and it was trending in the right direction. Now, Carolina finished in total defensive rankings last year, AJ. Carolina finished 116th nationally out of 131 teams. It's not good enough.
Bad.
Worst in the ACC.
Yeah, the App State game didn't do that.
Yeah.
The App State game got a lot of help. That's the reality of the situation.
100%. And allowing 436.5 yards per game. So, and again, that's not great. I don't think it's unrealistic to, like you mentioned, expect this defense to improve. And I wholeheartedly expect it to improve. Now, what the improvement is, like we've talked about, is it's kind of to be determined. But AJ, I'm going to keep saying this, and Carolina fans are going to get annoyed with me saying it, but I firmly believe this. Carolina is a slightly above average defense away from being a really good football team, and they were the same thing last year, and I think it's the same thing again this year. We look at what they have offensively. They don't have to be great, and I think that's the good thing, right? It's not like Carolina's going into this season like, okay, we're really thin offensively. I don't know if I trust the quarterback. I don't know how good he is. We got really young nucleus of guys. Man, we need our defense to be like top 25 in the country to have any chance of even getting close to winning 10 games. That's not the situation Carolina finds itself in. It's kind of the opposite. Carolina's got a really good offense. They've got a really, really good quarterback. They don't have to have an exceptional top 25 defense. They can have a top 75, a top 50 defense nationally, which is a drastic improvement from last year. Then this team has a chance to do some really, really good things this year. And I think when you look at the personnel that they have, the amount of guys they're returning, the transfers you mentioned that they brought in, I think Carolina has improved in a lot of ways with the transfers they brought in, no doubt about it. I think this defense has a chance to be a lot better, and I think that Gene Chizik year 2 factor has to be something that people talk about, and some of the staff additions that were brought in that, like you said, should allow a Chizik to focus on what he needs to focus on as the defensive coordinator, as the Jack coach, and not be worried about what the corners are doing and not be worried about what the defensive line is doing, trusting the people around him so that he can manage the defense as a whole and not be micromanaging these different position groups. That is a recipe for disaster in a lot of ways. And I think Carolina's past that point, and I think that leads to more of a recipe for success. So I don't think it's unrealistic at all to think Carolina should be much improved defensively this coming year. I think the only thing maybe in Carolina fans' minds is, well, we haven't really had a great defense in a very, very long time, 20 plus years, arguably. So I think that's something that Carolina fans are still pumping the brakes on in a lot of ways.
Some of the Butch defenses were really, really good.
Yeah, they were good, and they were very close to being really, really good.
I think if the defense is in the 50 to 60 range, that will get the program to take another step forward. But the ultimate goal, the mission Mac had in returning, and the mission is still there, the defense would have to do better than the 50 to 60 range, but that would be a step in the right direction. I think what's important when we say Chizik year 2 is the fact that it is year 2. And more important than anybody else in that program, it is to Gene. And I know that in speaking with some people in the program, that Gene had been away for 5 years and the sport changed, offense has changed. And he kind of learned a lot during the course of the year that, okay, maybe this doesn't work anymore. And it's really hard to make sweeping changes in the middle of the year. You can tweak what your intent was, what the approach is, and what the scheme is, but you just can't scrap a scheme in midseason. Okay. And I'm not saying they're scrapping a scheme, but my point is that I think that he may have been caught off guard a little bit, and based in talking to people in the program, may have been caught off guard a little bit about how the offenses were. So a lot of the benefit of his first year was him adapting and learning and recognizing the tendencies of offenses now and the nuances, excuse me, can't speak. So I think those things are really important. So when he sat down in his office in January and he starts mapping stuff out, he did it with the knowledge of a season in current college football behind him, already having experienced that. A year earlier, he was doing it with the last time he had coached a defense was 2016 under Larry Fedora. Things changed. So that, to me, as much as any other reason, is why I think year two will be better. Year two should be better. And I will again go back to the defensive front. I think the front's going to be better. Miles Murphy should be healthy. Wasn't healthy last year. He went through a period in the season where he wasn't even practicing. In talking to people in the program, there are big expectations from Travis Shaw. Like, Travis had a good spring. He's had a good offseason. He's NFL first-round potential. So maybe that guy emerges at some point. That would change things a lot. They like the way everybody else is coming up front. They love their inside linebackers. They think the Jacks can be playmakers. They have a dude who can find the ball in the secondary. In the first 4 years of MAC Part 2, Carolina's cornerbacks combined for 8 interceptions. Elijah Huzzy had 12 the last 2 seasons at East Tennessee State. And before you say, well, that's East Tennessee State, it's still a dude finding the ball and getting the ball. And one of those interceptions was at Mississippi State. So I think that everybody that's a Carolina fan that's watching or listening to this right now should have higher expectations for the defense, significantly higher expectations, which would put them in the 50 to 60 range. I think that would be a fair upgrade. Anything higher than that would be gravy and would give the program, the team, a chance to maybe even have a better season. Because if the offense is as good as we think it's going to be, a defense in the 50 to 60 range, to me, makes them an ACC contender.
Yeah, you're going to win a lot of games if you have that. And I'm glad you mentioned the defensive line. That was the biggest thing missing last year. I really firmly believe that if Carolina just could have rolled out an average pass rush on a consistent basis, the defense would have looked that much better. Because I think there was a lot of good parts behind it. And I know some of them left and needed to leave, and it's best for both parties. But I do think it was just so telling watching the team last year that they had no pass rush. And when you're allowing, it doesn't matter what quarterback you're allowing. It could be the best quarterback in the country or one of the worst. If he's got, 5-10 seconds back there in the pocket every time, you're going to make him look really good. And I think that's the biggest thing. If you can just improve that defensive line, AJ, if we're just focusing on one group improving, if you can just improve that defensive line, I think the defense as a whole behind it will drastically improve as well. It's not like we're going into this year, Carolina's going into this year like, well, this group needs to get a lot better and that group needs to get a lot better. And these two guys really need to play out of their skin the whole year to have it. No, I think their parts are there. The experience is there. The talent's there, but you have to have a developed defensive line and you have to have some kind of pass rush. AJ, Carolina was one of the worst, like top 5 worst defensive lines in the country last year in terms of pass rush. That can't happen.
Well, and you get more turnovers. You get more turnovers. So the sack disparity last year, Carolina allowed 40 and got 17. So think of the yardage differences that opponents are creating for their offense. Carolina's offense constantly had to start inside its own 25. And the fact they didn't get a lot of turnovers and they don't force a lot of fumbles. There are a lot of things they got to do better. Walking through the airport and looking good, or coming out of the tunnel rather and looking good, that's great. And they look good. They look the part a lot of the time, but you've got to make it happen. So if they're improved up front, with the gap control, with generating conventional pass rush, and just being able to occupy certain guys occupying multiple blockers. If Travis Shaw can occupy 2 blockers every time he's on the field, for every snap, he's going to do his job, even if he doesn't make a tackle. Then the guys behind him have more of an opportunity to make plays. That's what you need to do. You need to make game-changing plays, period.
Agreed.
End of discussion, or as Hubert would say, period, plain and simple, and about 5 other things, and boom, exclamation mark, right?
No, 100%.
Mac doesn't say it. Mac should steal that Hubertism and say it a few times with respect to the defense.
Yeah, I mean, just imagine this offense next year, what we expect it to be, playing alongside a defense that forces turnovers. And get it instead of Carolina starting at their own 20 every time, starting at the 50, starting at the opponent's 35. God, they rack up so many points. It's Carolina again is an above average defense, slightly above average defense away from, I think, being a really good football team and really good football program. But again, it as we've seen over the last 20 years plus years, it's been a struggle for Carolina to develop a consistent defense that's really good. Not offense. They've done that pretty well under Mac. I mean, give them credit for that, but got to have a good defense in today's college football.
And having a good defense, we were talking about optimism and stuff in a different drop. Having your defense gives fans optimism because knowing you can actually have a chance to stop people, that fans get into it more in home games, that the expectation's higher, so the hurts a little bit more when they don't get it done. You know, Butch had it happening, and there's a reason 30,000 people showed up to spring game in 2010 because of the defense. They still worked great offensively, but because of that defense. So defense gives people more optimism. Offense is exciting, but defense gives people greater hope because you've got to at some point stop somebody.
Yeah.
And if you get enough stops, you can win games, especially in current college football. So
100%. Yeah. In summary, I think we both expect Carolina's, I think it's not a crazy thing at all to expect Carolina's defense to be improved this year. And in judging on what they've brought back, judging on some of the hires, judging on Gene Chizik's year 2, if they aren't improved and maybe even significantly improved, then I think that the criticism that will be labeled at him is probably deserved, for lack of a better word. Because to me, there's no excuse to not be improved this year. There's no excuse.
And nobody will be more critical than Mac.
Yeah,
there are a lot 100%. Of hard
100%.
conversations that go on in that building, and people think, oh, Mac, Grandpa, he's always nice and building everybody up. He knows how to get on people's rear ends.
Yeah.
And someone told me, it's just a direct quote, and I'm going to say it. So I advance, cuss word coming up here. It's a direct quote from somebody in the building, and I'll take out part of it. It's that he knows how to, quote, get on their asses, end quote.
I love that, man. I love that. That's what you got to be able to do as someone who coaches football, position group coach or the head coach or whatever. You got to be able to get these guys going a little bit. The standard has to be high. And I think whoever that quote's about, wink, wink, I think you're 100% right about. So, AJ, we'll go ahead and wrap this one up. If you think Carolina's getting improved defensively, if you think they should be improved defensively and will be improved defensively, let's go ahead and like this video below so we can gauge some of the optimism fans have going in to the year. And again, we want to hear from you guys. Get involved on Twitter, Facebook, at our website, TarHeelIllustrated.com, in the premium message boards. We'll have this as a thread. We want to hear from you guys. And if you're not signed up, you can do that for just $8.33 a month. But again, free ways to get in contact again through Twitter and Facebook. All the links are below. I've been Jacob Turner. He's been Andrew Jones. We appreciate you guys watching. As always, another episode of our Daily Drop series. I hope you guys are enjoying it. If you are enjoying it, go ahead and smash that like button below as well. Make sure you like, share, subscribe, hit the notification bell too. See you on the next one. Thanks.